Very good. And the agenda of today is to introduce you a little bit of ChemOrbis and our methodology. For those who don't know us, we will talk about what happened in stream synthesis in 2020, which is the base of what's happening in 2021, of course. We will analyze the factors that are important in this year and this months and the coming months, and lead a look also to the trade balance of Europe. And then the real important matter that probably attracted most of you is what will happen in the coming months for the prices. So I will talk about our methodology, our reports, our algorithm, and so on, and draw some conclusions. ChemOrbis is, for those who don't know us, is a market information agency providing global information on polymers, not only the commodity, but also engineering, recycled biopolymers, and feedstock and monomers as well. We are mostly known for our neutrality policy. We don't take, let's say, sides for the buyers or the converters or for the producers. We try to report the market in a very timely and accurate fashion. That's why people appreciate ChemOrbis. On the side, you can find analytical tools, a trading platform, and we provide also publications in paper, and we organize conferences. What happened in 2020? Basically, you all remember that the February-March period was when the pandemic started. The effect was immediately a slowdown on the economy. Nobody was traveling. The goods as well suffered because the trades for all materials slowed down, and the economy was a little bit stopped, like crunch for the economy. The oil and raw materials for the plastics industry were with low prices and stable during 2020. Plastic volumes in the end, if you consider the whole year, they lost little because there was a very strong recovery in the second half for the demand of polymers. So if we, in Europe, we consider about a 5% reduction versus 2019. In general, because of the low prices of feedstock and polymers, particularly, producers have suffered low margins. And this is part of the story, very important, because when producers have low margins, the first thing they do, they postpone perhaps new capacity expansions, they postpone new projects, and of course they anticipate the maintenances, and of course they try not to put too much volumes in the market. The polymer prices in 2020 were very volatile. We will see the details later on, and they touched a historical low. Not historical because in 2008, after the financial crisis, prices were even lower than what happened in 2020, but they were just a little above those. And in fact, let's see what happened for PE prices. In this picture, you can see the prices as a monthly average from January 2020 to December 2020 for the main grades of PE, HDPE, LDPE, LL, and MLL, EPE. And as you can see, the metallocene is the higher price for all the grades, and the lowest one is the LLDPC4. Important thing to notice is that in May we touched a minimum for all the grades. They recovered a little bit during the summertime, and then they flatten out until basically the end of the year. Same thing happened for polypropylene prices. We report here for the same time period, January to December 2020. the average monthly prices for homopolymer and copolymer, you see the minimum touched in May 2020, recovery, and then flat, and then recovery towards the end of the year. Same story, but a little bit different for PVC. PVC touched a minimum of prices in May, and since then the prices went up. There was no respite during the autumn, and prices went up. The reason why this happened is because the PVC prices were so depressed, and as comparison were also higher in other regions, which is also happening also for other polymers, but particularly for PVC, they were higher in other regions. So what happened, and this is the reason why this trend is happening, is because Europe had the lowest prices in the world for PVC. European producers were exporting a lot, and locally there were no imports. So this created a little bit of imbalance in supply-demand situation for PVC, which is lasting even now. For styrenics, we reported prices for GPPS and HIPS and ABS. See the minimum touched for all polymers in May, a little bit of recovery, and then increase, flatten, and then increase towards the end of the year. Styrenic is very particular category because they are between the polymers the most volatile. We will see later what I mean by that. For PT, the big category of the 6 polymer commodities, these are the 6 one that we cover mostly, with the daily prices, weekly prices, and so on. You can see that because there was an oversupply situation, prices touched the minimum in May, but actually after the recovery they went even lower in September, October, November, mainly because of oversupply. What is it happening in 2021, and what can we expect? Well, the first month saw a very strong recovery. Starting January, even December 2020, there was a very strong recovery for certain sectors, packaging, building and construction, through the government incentives. Automotive did a boom in the early months, but now is stuck again. But strong demand from many sectors. We had a problem of limited availability of polymers and other materials. Not only polymers are suffering for lack of supply, you know, metals and other materials are also suffering. But what happened for polymers is because mostly in Europe, they came from a very low prices and margins period during the last months of 2020. So the supply was very short, when at the same time the demand boomed, and the imports were not there. So there was a really unbalanced situation. We had in these months, and still now, unfortunately, high logistic and freight costs. We will see more about it, why they increased, and what is expected in the coming months about those. We had reduced polymer import and higher exports because Europe had the historically low. If you can mute yourself, please, so that if anybody has by mistake the microphone open, please shut it down. So lack of imports for the logistics, high costs, and so on, and because Europe prices were not attractive for the exporters, and it was lack of supply also because the European producers were exporting in better return markets. We have seen these months an increasing prices of oil and raw materials for now. In fact, the forecast is for decrease, but I'll explain better later on. Prices touched in few months historical highs. I think the historical highs were touched between the end of April and May, and but really high. The gap between May 2020 and May 2021 is in some cases over the double of prices. very steep prices, very steep increases month by month, 200-300 euros per ton every month. And it's completely distorted supply-demand balance. It was more speculation than real supply-demand driving the price increases. And of course, because of these high prices, many people suffered, particularly, well, I say converters, but also producers probably had an impact on their credit lines, because for the same amount of volume, you had immediately a bigger turnover, so the credit lines were suffering. Recycle policy and valorization of recycled. In this situation, we saw during 2020, but also in this period particularly, a revaluation and an increase of importance of recycled materials, and the importance of recycled plastics, particularly in Europe, is very let's say important, because in packaging, you see these are the regulations in place. 50% of plastics must be recycled by 2025, 55% of plastics must be recycled by 2030, and in some cases, like the beverage containers, the use of recycled material has to be very high already in a few years' time. But just to give you some data, in 2018, 29 million tons were collected in Europe, but only 9 mechanically recycled. So it's overall is less than 20%, is more 10-15% of the total polymers demand that is represented by recycled. In some cases, though, the demand of recycled is so big that is distorting the market, which is the case for PET, which I'll show you in a minute. Anyway, the solutions proposed by suppliers are mostly seen as a marketing promotion more than listening or complying to regulations. So you have different approaches. You have the polymers for renewable sources called biopolymers, nothing to do with the biodegradable ones, of course. The polymers with percentage, different percentage of mechanical recycle in it, or polymers from chemical recycle, which is mostly the producer solution, which I think it also is the best, but that's my opinion, of course. And there is a run also to certify what you use as a polymer from renewable sources or mechanical recycle or whatever, and there is a proliferation of certificates and certified bodies. As a curiosity, I went onto the site of one of the major certifying bodies, and unfortunately the list of fake certificates is longer than the real ones. So something has to be done here in a better policy information of certifying bodies and the certifiers of the certifiers. I was talking before about the impact of requiring more recycled PET, for example, in the beverage sector. As you can see in this graph here, you have the high line here represented by the food grade pellets PET recycled, which during January 2020 until May 2021 was always well above the level of the virgin PET, represented by the blue line, and the rPET flakes, which is also going to be in high demand in the coming months because of what we just told, and probably will also overtake the virgin material. To put everything in perspective, it's important to see what's the polymer demand and the production capacity in Europe. It's not a 100% correct table, but it gives you an idea of what are the polymers in excess of local capacity, or what polymers we need imports to balance the demand. So you can see in polyolefins, polymer production capacity for Europe is not enough to cover the needs. We have an excess for PVC of production. In fact, Europe is a very big exporter of PVC, and also a little bit for styrenics. But for ABS, for example, and PET, we are strong importers from the Far East. ABS, if you look at the percentage, it's only 200, 300,000 tons per year, but those 300 tons represent 25, 30% of the market, which is missing. And when we had, like in this month, totally absence of imports, this is a disaster for the availability. Another way to look at the supply balance situation, it's the list of maintenances or force majeures. This is just an example, which is from a week ago or so for the polypropylene situation. In this table, which is, by the way, all these tables and graphs that I am showing to you, I used as a data source the site of ChemOrbis. So basically, in principle, you could produce yourself the same results. So you have the date of announcement, the company, if they make a polymer or monomer, and the nameplate capacity in 1 year, where it is situated, the plant, and how long is lasting the problem, and what is the latest comment. But as you can see, if you look at a given month, you can easily adapt this total quantity. These are year, but if you even represent a quarter, they can easily adapt to 500,000 tons missing, 600, 700, which combined to the fact that in that same period, we were, as Europeans, exporting more than importing. This created really a crunch in the market. Now let's see what happened, attaching the last bit of price evolution in 2021. So the following graphs show the price trends for the different polymers starting from January 2020 until the average of June, until basically this week. And for polyethylene, you can see the strong increase happened starting in December until basically May. We are starting to see already, if you want a fresh comment, in these 2 weeks, some relief. Relief is brought mainly by increase of exports, increased availability. So in some countries, North Europe and so on, they are trying to pass rollovers, in some cases, depending on the grade. For example, LDP is the one most in shortness, is still, let's say, on the increased side. But we shall see maximum touch in May, and see from the coming weeks a slowdown, and finally a decrease in prices. Just to notice, for example, that metallocene was most expensive until February, but then after February 2021, the most expensive grade became LDP. This is because LDP is missing in the market more than the other grades, is suffering. This is the situation for polypropylene. As a further explanation, I attach here on top of the polymer prices, also the monomer propylene average monthly price. As you can see, from January 2021, the monomer stayed more or less stable, while the prices of the polymer increased. So there is no, and this happened also for polyethylene, for polystyrene, for all major polymers. There was no correlation between raw materials prices and costs and the polymer costs. It is basically not supply demand situation, but speculation driving this situation of price increases, historical highs, and so on. A nice picture that shows you the trend of the PVC. PVC, as I told you, is a very peculiar situation because until basically, and I'll show you some data later on, until basically April, Europe prices were lower than elsewhere at global level. So we were not attracting any imports, and European producers and suppliers were exporting a lot. So totally unbalanced situation, which drove the PVC to historical highs never achieved. We can see here the history about styrenics, PS and ABS, and finally you see that in PS the price is already turning down since the end of May. Actually, turning down is 200 or 300. So it gives you an idea on how fast also the recovery of the prices is going to be also for the other polymers. And ABS a little bit less, because I told you before, ABS is a very unbalanced market situation, depending a lot on imports, which are lacking for the moment. And PET, same story, strong recovery on lack of imports, mostly in 2021, and prices which started to slow down already in May, despite the fact that the economy and the summer season is entering in the high season for PET, for beverages. The logistic costs, let's have a look at what happened. Why freight situation was so disrupted? Basically, it goes back again to the COVID pandemic crisis. All trading slowdown actually stopped in the second quarter of 2020. And because of that, many producers had to revise their costs, basically reducing their number of ships going around, so that they could concentrate all their parcels in one ship to stabilize their costs. As a result, the container fees increased by 3-4 times. And even nowadays, shipping from Far East or Americas to Europe is not very cheap. It can cost up to $300 per metric ton. So you can imagine, if the Euro prices are in level or below the rest of the global prices, imports are very penalized, of course. We foresee a return to normality towards the end of the second quarter. We are already there, but there are still difficulties. So this situation on logistic costs, high logistic costs, may last another month or two. And of course, the Suez issues didn't help in that, of course. I can show you now in two simple graphs what happened since 2018, every quarter for the imports for all thermoplastic polymers in Europe. Since we had Brexit, by the first quarter of 2020, January 2020, the data are referred to EU 27 and not EU 28. But even with EU 27, these are the figures 2020, first, second quarter, and so on, you can see a dramatic slowdown of imports on the third and fourth quarter of 2020, and a little bounce back on the first quarter, particularly since March. Europe is attracting more polymers. So if you think about this, 500,000 million ton per quarter is big impact when you also look at the exports, because the exports at the same time, and this is referred to EU 27, so Great Britain is missing here, but as you can see, we had record export in all 2020 and even in the first quarter of 2021. So unbalanced situation again. Let's talk now about the polymer price forecast. What are the factors to consider for our model that we introduced since January 2020? There are medium, short-term factors, and by medium-term factors, I mean, medium long-term factors, I mean those that can impact after 12 months, after 6 months or so, because the short term are basically 1 to 3 months. After the third month, only a few factors can influence the prices. And these are, of course, the oil futures, the energy futures, the new capacity that will come online, the seasonality, the GDP forecast, and so on. But these are just few factors. If you look instead at the short terms, 1-3 months look out, you can have many more factors. And of course, you have the offer, you have the list of plants with problems, issues, planned or unplanned, and so on. The demand expectation, the consumers' trust, and so on. Those indexes are very, very important. The sectorial indexes, and so on. You have the price trends in international markets. Traditionally spot markets like Asia and China, and I will show you the importance of this. The theoretical margins of producers, which is polymer price minus the raw materials, the monomer cost, the monomer spot prices versus the contract prices, and the theoretical netbacks. Netback is basically what stays in the pockets as a profit of the supplier when you deduct all costs of sales. So I will explain better this, but basically you have to deduct all costs, transportation, freight, duties, if there are anti-dumping duties, handling, whatever. And what stays there is basically the profit, net profit, and the net profit drives the exports and the imports, because people tend to sell where they gain more profits, of course. The energy forecast, this is the last. As an energy forecast, we use the EIA forecast. It's published usually by the middle of the month, so this is the June one. And as you can see, it's totally not in, well, I would say not in line, but we are seeing prices, average prices already above $70 per barrel for the oil, and increasing. But what is driving down in the coming months from June to 21 to June 22, according to the EIA, is that the assumption is that basically there will be an increase in production of millions barrels per day from the OPEC producers, which will go in parallel with the economy recovery. So they stated already there, and we are expecting, AIA expecting an impact in the availability, in this extra supply of oil, and it will impact also on the prices starting already in August, September. I reported also the natural gas. Natural gas expressed in dollars per million BTU is foreseen to increase in the coming months, touching a peak in winter because of its use for heating purposes and so on, for power generation. But the justification, the main explanation for the increase is because there is an extra export for this natural gas from the Americas to other parts of the world, and there is also an extra consumption driven by the economy recovery, of course, to generate power and so on. And now I show you what are the results. Our price forecast reports consist of 7-8 pages with explanation of several factors, or which factors we think they will influence the price trends in the coming months, and further analysis and so on. But this is the end results. So here you have the historical last 3 months, March, April, May. These are historical prices, actual prices, and this is how we see the prices evolving in Europe in the coming months until June 2022. So as you can see, it's not very sharp decrease, but is pretty big in my opinion. Let's say that we should level off after the summer. And between the different grades, LDP is the one suffering most. So maybe the slope is also less steep for LDP. And you here have the table with all the prices. Same thing for polypropylene, March 21 until June 2022, homopolymer and copolymer. Unfortunately for polypropylene, we are seeing stable prices still in June. The reason is because the supply-demand situation is unbalanced. There are still less imports for polypropylene than for polyethylene. But you can see that the decreases should materialize in June or level off, and then July onwards, pretty steep decrease as well. PVC, you can see that because of the unbalanced situation that I explained you earlier, we are foreseeing increases in June and level off in July, actually increases over versus June. And because of this unbalanced situation, and not until the imports will come in force, I think prices will be stable and slower to decrease versus other polymers. And also we see that because of this situation, the prices will not go down to the pre-COVID levels below 1,000 and so on. For PS, we saw already an inversion of trend in materializing in May. June will be even sharp, as sharp as the increases, as you can see. Styrenics is very, very volatile. I saw the monomers in previous months increases on the contract of plus 500 in one go. Incredible, never seen things like that. And for ABS, more or less the same situation, decreases thanks to the increasing of imports availability and lower, let's say, recovery of the prices to normal levels. And here you can have the table. So PET prices started to slow down, to decrease already in May. We see no effect or no too big effects from the high season this summer, mostly stable to slow down prices, decreases, slow decreases, and then winter time minimum, and then recovery with the next year. The thing here is that PET imports are already coming in big volumes. International prices benchmark. The significance of this graph is pretty simple. Here I reported the prices for polypropylene, homopolymer, and LDPE film in China and in Europe. And Europe is following these patterns for LDPE and polypropylene, and for China import grades, you can see they started already to slow down since April. And in fact, you can see this decreasing effect materializing in Europe with 1 month and a half, 2 months later here. It's not a perfect rule, but it helps you to understand what the market can expect, the market can go in the future months. And you also can see here that what I told you before, that in some cases, China had bigger prices than Europe, and not very different during 2020 at all. If you look at the same situation for PVC, which is very, very interesting, of course, you can see that the Europe price, actually, this is presented by this line here, the green, they stayed below the China prices for the most part of 2020, and until April of this year, they started to be higher. The yellow line is the local price of the market in China. Of course, as soon as the market, local market, went below the import market, the blue line, the import cannot be higher than the local, of course, and you understand why the import got a very strong correction in this month, while the local stayed more or less the same. And with this price gap is not big, but 200-300 euros per ton. We don't get imports from China. It's not PVC. But from other countries, we may have imports like from North Africa, Egypt, or Mexico and North America. So just to draw some conclusions, the situation that we are currently having in Europe is pretty exceptional, but that was for say for metals, and I say for plastics is not like that. I mean, this was a rather exceptional situation, and things are already coming into balance for supply demand for many polymers, and prices are returning to normal levels pre-COVID era. Europe needs import. Of course, it represented total of 16% of the demand in 2019, and for certain polymers, it's growing because Europe don't invest in new capacities, just the bottleneck in minor the bottlenecks or little things. And at the same time, the market grows slowly, but it grows with the GDP growth. The netbacks can anticipate the trading flows. We saw that looking also at the international spot Asiatic market, which offer a very nice benchmark of what may happen in the short term, 1-3 months. And of course, everybody came interested into ChemOrbis in this period, even the second tier, the third tiers, because those using end products in plastics or semi-finished product in plastic, because they had requests from their suppliers of price increases. And therefore, we had a lot of companies who never cared before about plastic prices, but now they became very, very interested. And I think that the lesson to be learned here is that, okay, you can use the services, market intelligence when the market is going up like it did, but you can get the same benefits, if not even more, also in a decreasing trend. We have examples of converters from other regions who are trying to destock their levels because they don't want their stock to be deflated of their costs. So this is interesting, and in fact, some of them use also the trading platform of ChemOrbis to do that. Okay, with this I have finished, so I will open the session of questions. You can raise your question by voice. You introduce yourself, and also via the chat if you want. Do we have questions on the chat?
Yeah, we have 2 questions on the chat. Here is the first one. How President Biden's climate change policy affect the polymers industry? Positive or negative? Thanks. From
Errol Kaliskaner. That's good.
Okay.
I ask.
I think it's a very tough question. President Biden certainly is becoming closer to the European policymakers in terms of environment awareness and so on, and he has made already some important steps towards that. In terms of impact on can you say it on the prices or on the general industry? Can you
mainly production capacity.
Okay.
Petrochemical, yes. Yeah.
Well, production capacity, investments, new capacities, and so on. I think that it might cool down a bit the run to new capacities in the US. There was a big wave of new capacities, is still to be completed, but it may cool down that kind of thing. Although still now the production of oil and production of derivatives which are exported also to other countries in the Americas, in the US, is increasing. So for the moment, I would say is neutral policy. There is no real impact, but that's my opinion, of course. Huh?
Okay. Thank you very much.
The second question, please.
Yes, we have another question from Mark Winkler. And the question is, what kind of changes do you see in the import to Europe from different globally region 2020 versus 2021? And which sales regions took major share from the lack of imports from the US, Middle East, and South Korea for PP and PE in 2021?
This is a very, very complex question, very specific. It can be answered because in the end it's down to analysis of figures, and it can be done. By and large, I can say for the benefit of all, without going too much into details, I can pick up this item later on with Mark for sure, and also share his comments with me. We can do that. So what I have seen, and it depends again on polymer categories, polyolefins, styrenics, and so on. But in general, what I have seen is that the first benefits for those who lost share came, and the first to pick up the opportunities to export to Europe were the CIS and Russian countries for both PVC, polyolefins, and so on. That is, let's say, as a impression I have to be more precise, corroborate that with data analysis and so on. But that's my first impression. So the CIS and countries and Russia, they were close. Actually, they provided a relief for some polymers, because that really the converters in Europe are desperate still. So. Okay, I will pick up this and expand later with Mark. Any other question more from the chat or voice?
Yes, Anna Michel speaking. I have just a question. We saw on your charts that you're forecasting a decrease on many materials on the styrenics and PVC and PP. This is for you, the effect of a lower demand will arrive soon, or it's a combination with a lower demand and with another factor like a decrease of the feedstock?
It's combined situation, because as I showed you before, is what we take in account in our model. There are several factors, but at a given time, only 2 or 3 are important. So what is becoming important in the coming months, I mean July, August, September, where we see the sharp decrease of the polymer prices, for certain, of course, and to a less extent for others, is mostly the supply, extra supply availability, less to an extent to the raw materials, because we have seen that prices are slowing down even if oil prices are high. Polymers are totally not correlated in these days. So the first impact that we will see on prices in this period is extra supply, mostly from, let's say, the ending of the maintenance season, improving there, less exports, and also more imports. So supply is the key factor.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, can I ask a question?
Of course.
Okay, thank you so much for your good presentation, first of all. And my question is, I hope after the pandemic, finish of the pandemic, there will be a reasonable increase in polymer, also petrochemical demand. But you don't join my idea in your last conclusion. What do you think about my expectations? Increasing price and margin in petrochemical, especially for polymers.
Well, it's mostly we think that there will be a sharp recovery. It's already happening after the pandemic. but there will be as well extra supply, and the extra supply is coming from new capacities, imports, and so on. That was the dominating factor. Of course, there might be some issues on some specific polymers, like we have seen for LDPE or for PVC and so on. But in the end, the industry, the capacity is there. Then more capacities are going to be launched, and my opinion is that those are more important than let's say the boost in demand. And also, please consider that if you look at later on after the presentation charts and historical prices, the historical prices the historical prices are, let's say, lower than the bottom of that we see happening for the forecast, which means the prices that we see as a second part of 2021, even if they decrease from the highs, they will still be higher than the historical prices in 2020. And this is better for producers, for their margins, and in the end probably for the industry, less volatility. Although the essence of ChemOrbis, we are here because there is price volatility, right?
Okay, thank you.
We have many other questions in the chat, and from Oksana Baturina, she's asking, we already see cheap Omo polymer import volumes below 1,600 euro and HT below 1,400 euro in Europe. Do you think these offers will accelerate the downward trend?
Absolutely. And please consider, I didn't specify well, but those prices that we put in the forecast, they are average prices. So imagine that in this period where prices were changing week by week, also our job of reporting and analyzing price ranges has become more difficult. And this is happening exactly also in the downturn of prices. My colleague looking after polyolefins told me about these prices already. And of course, what can we do? Can we report a price range of 400 plus minus 400 is silly. So we still have to represent what is the market core of the price. But it's true, those prices are present, and for the moment they are rather the exception, but they will certainly accelerate and boost the availability first, and then the prices going down. But of course, bear in mind that these are limited volumes, although the majority of converters in Europe still had to rely on suppliers, local suppliers, and so on.
Yes, hi, this is Pedro Ampis, and I have a question. Do you expect that the trend for lowering prices of commodity plastics as we see them will have an impact on the current demand for bioplastics?
What do you mean by bioplastic? The bio-based or the biodegradable?
No, I mean biodegradable, of course.
Okay. Oh, but biodegradable, unfortunately, it's a very tiny market. We are talking about 1 million ton or less global level. We actually have a dedicated report because we think that it's becoming important in markets like Europe and so on. PLA compounds of PLA for film, for injection molding, and so on. But those prices increased as well of biopolymers, biodegradable polymers. But I don't think there will be a strong input because of the towards biodegradable plastics, because of the raw materials of the polymer, virgin polymer commodities prices increasing. It's so tiny, the biodegradable polymer sectors, that it's inelastic, totally inelastic. And plus, I see some concerns there as well. I don't know if you're familiar with the regulations, SUP, single-use products, and so on, which is coming in place in Europe. But actually, that regulations basically equalizes, compares the biodegradable and the normal polymers on the same level. So it's really there could be a crisis there as well for the biodegradable. Although I think there's a bright future, new polymers, grades introduced and so on for the biodegradable polymers. It can only grow. Maybe the growth will be steeper in the coming months. Actually, there is an issue of capacity there because the demand is totally higher, more than the supply. But I don't see a direct link between polymer virgin prices increasing and therefore the use towards biodegradable. More questions, please?
Hi, my name is Jamil Khan, and my question is how the global carbon neutral goal will impact on the polymer industry?
How, sorry, the global carbon?
Yeah, the carbon neutral goal of 2050 as the United Nations as well as the Paris Agreement has reached. So how it is going to impact on the growth of the polymer industry?
My opinion, to be, I can be direct with you, I can play with words and so on, but my opinion, it's there won't be any impact because polymer demand will grow. Demand is growing according to the development, the GDP growth. Packaging is growing dramatically because of many reasons. And in my opinion, this will not have an influence. The carbon neutrality can be achieved more towards recycling policies. So chemical recycle, mechanical recycle, and so on. That will be pushed. That will be providing part of the solution to the carbon neutrality policy. But virgin polymers will still grow year by year. That's why new plants are built.
Thank you.
Okay, we have another question from Dante Estrada. Said, here in Mexico, we have some policies that restrict the use of plastics. Some materials even are cheaper overseas because big companies take plenty of tons monthly. So what do you suggest as a strategy so we can trade with these materials?
I don't know which materials we are talking about, but certainly, yes. I mean, policymakers, they influence the trade of plastics, the trade flows, and so on. In Europe, for PVC, for example, there was a 25% anti-dumping duty from the US, which was abolished for a few months. Now we are thinking about reintroducing it or not. So whenever you introduce measures like this, the market is distorted, the competition is no more there, and you move trade from one side to another side. And the competition is distorted, of course. There's no more supply demand. I don't know if I answered well to the question, but that's with little details as I have for Mexico. That's my general answer.
Another question from the chat from Janette Zayer from Dow. How would you see the demand changing during summer period with the different countries reopening? Will it be different than usual?
Well, I think because of the after pandemic, everybody is expecting things to go back to normal, tourism, traveling, and therefore strictly linked to that, all the sectors, the packaging, the building and construction is still very strongly under influence from the government's incentives and so on. So I expect this end of pandemic, or let's say going out of the pandemic crisis, to have a very big impact on demand. And that's my opinion, very big impact. Yeah. We should see and at a certain extent, we have foreseen prices decreasing in the coming months because of the improved supply situation. But of course, we have to always keep in check what the demand is going to be. Although the demand is not, let's say, dramatically, it would be a 10% increase in demand, which is very big in my opinion. So we shall see if extra supply or demand will prevail. But certainly an improving demand will be there. That's certainly very big also.
Okay, another one from Kalin Tomut. What about the recycled market, which seemed to get also quite a hit on prices?
Well, for Europe, it's becoming definitely a hot subject. Mechanical recycle is no more sufficient. And there are regulations in place for certain sectors and that are creating really a problem for using virgin materials. So I think both the industry, the producers of polymers, but also the converters, which have to certainly invest in the image of the industry, because plastics has a bad image, unfortunately, these days. We cannot avoid that to take serious steps towards a serious management of the afterlife of polymers. And afterlife is basically close the loop. And that's how I see, although a lot has to be done. And when you see, for example, that in beverage sectors the recycled material has to be used as a main percentage, of course, if the capacity is not there, you have a distortion in supply, demand, and prices of recycled material are going to be higher than the virgin material, because there is simply not enough supply. But that is becoming really something important, and I think Europe is going to be a leader in that, because a lot of producers, a lot of chemical companies have the technology, have the expertise, have the manpower and everything to be leading in that sector, so that we can be an example for the rest of the world when they also to buy it and pressing buy them and so on.
A question from Mrs. Richterova. It's in Europe are different prices for HD in West comparing to Central East Europe. This month we bought high density for 1,380 euro from Hungary producer. West producer offered for 1,500 euro. What can be the reason?
Difficult. I don't know. But certainly when the market is changing, you can have spots outside the range. That's true. And this, I would comment, it's an early indication that the market is correcting itself pretty rapidly in these products, HDPE, to a less extent in PP and LDPE, but definitely I'm thinking positively that they are true prices, and they are part of what's happening nowadays. So good for you. You got these offers. They are competitive. Buy the product very fast.
Okay, I have another one from Dale Chattel. How do you see the way forward with recycled content versus PLA material?
I think they are different applications, although it really depends on the policymakers how they will rule it. Because, for example, this kind of plastic recycle directive in Europe was issued a year ago or so. but they didn't issue the guidelines until the end of May. And the guidelines are read, they are confused. They are contradicting themselves in some points. So, for example, there is no difference between normal plastic and biodegradable plastic. In my opinion, they are very, very different. So, I think that recycled materials, mechanically recycled, and in future chemically recycled, will still be playing a more important role in terms of volumes, tonnages, millions of tons, and so on, more than PLA. PLA is still a very niche market, very important in some applications, but mostly it's marketing than real providing solutions. And therefore, for example, European policymakers in the guidelines said, we are not sure about the PLA and compounds long-term results or implications in effects in the environment. Therefore, we compare them to plastics, full stop. You cannot use them as a disposable product, even if they are biodegradable. So it's still to be understood in this case. Okay, next, if there are.
Yes, we have another direct message I received from Pavan Birla. He's asking, as Europe is importing polyethylene and polypropylene on a regular basis, which are the countries who export to Europe? Any info available polymers wise?
I can I can show you the site. You still see my screen, right?
Yes.
I can show you this analysis for details of polymers for Italy. Okay, so if we take 2020, for example, you see that the major, this is Italy imports month by month in tonnage. Okay, so in December, Italy imported 365,000 tons. And if you look, there are the intra-Euro ones, Germany, France, Belgium, Spain, Netherlands, and then you suddenly have South Korea as extra EU, then Saudi Arabia. Clearly, I could go through all single product category, but just to show you who are the major countries from which Europe is importing, Italy and Europe basically, is Korea, so far East, Saudi Arabia, United States, then you have India, although it decreased during the last part of 2020, Indonesia, Qatar, then you have Egypt and Mexico, mostly PVC, Turkey also, Russian Federation, and the Russian Federation, as you can see, is increasing. Okay, so I think I answered your question, right?
Yes, thank you. I did get that you have analysis on the website already. Thanks. Maybe that can be useful.
Okay.
I have another question, if you can take it just quick. I heard that European Commission is putting some taxes on the use of virgin polymer in comparison to if they are going to, or production is going to be used for recycled material. So that we heard that Italy was already approved it, but because of pandemic, I think it was prolonged, that they didn't yet applied. Do you know something about it, or what?
Yeah, that's part of the EU directive I was mentioning before, and the way each country has to implement the regulations because the directive is there, but then each country has, let's say, the last saying in how they implement it. But they want, of course, to get money. The plastic tax, which we called in Italy, was first planned in January 2020, then postponed, and now is postponed to January 2021. Mostly it will be like 50 euro cents per kilogram, so tremendous. really big impact and so on. And the reason is that the industry didn't digest very well this, of course, because they think that the policymakers wants just to make cash out of it, to compensate from other losses and so on, like the Brexit and everything. But yeah, there will be that implementation. Of course, it will be for Italy from January 2021, and in the end, it will be a big boost for recycled materials. Definitely, big boost, big boost. A lot of increase in demand.
But does it mean the polymer prices are going to be, like when you say tremendously, mean be almost doubled? Because then if you say about 80 cent per kg tax, which means 800 euro per ton. So
well, in the end, how it is applied, this tax, that it's important, but it's in the end a sort of VAT or extra value added tax that you add on the polymer. So the converter will have to transfer it to the consumer in the end, and we as consumers are going to pay the bill in terms of items costing more and so on, unless, of course, and this is the trend, in particular in the packaging, where this regulation will be implemented. There is a big round to use recycled materials. So wherever they can, they want to avoid to pay the plastic tax. But in the end, the plastic tax will be providing, let's say, extra tax revenue from the sector. And yes, I mean, 500 euros per ton is big. It's big money, and it will impact on certain applications.
okay, thank you
Mostly
for the information.
packaging, yeah, mostly packaging.
Yeah, correct. So ultimately, we are the one who's going to bear this one, not the industry, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks to you.
Okay, we have another question. When do you think will be possible that recycled polymers will cost less than virgin polymer?
With the current trend, I think it's nowhere near. Well, for polyolefin, is still the virgin material is still more expensive than the recycled. And within the recycled, I can show you, for example, rapidly a recycled polymer report. No, actually, I can use another. Very rapidly, I can show you Northwest Europe, say P, recycled polymers, and say LDB or HTP. And RHTP, for example. So I'm going to build a graph with the virgin polymer HDPE together with the recycled ones. So this is the graph I want to use, and I want 52 weeks. So you have June to May, because we didn't put the prices of the recycled materials until now. But we have, for example, the virgin material here. We have the yellow line, which is the RTP, RHDP black corrugated pipes from post-consumer, which is the lowest price. And you have the RHDP black pipes from post-industry recycle, so a better quality material, still standard quality. Because when we talk about recycled grades, it's important that we talk about constant quality. Otherwise, it's difficult to talk about prices. But as you can see, this is the situation. If I make the same chart for PET, it's totally different matter. So for PET, you have rPET. I move them here. And well, let's food grade PET bottle. There it is. So you can see the different grades of PET here. They are PET flakes clear blue, the food pellets recycled, and the RPET mixed colors, which is the lowest quality and therefore the cheaper one. So it really depends on the polymer, but the PET is the one that is going to be, let's say, used more because of the packaging and the containers, the beverages, and so on. Next question, please.
We have the last question from the chat from Jamil Khan. What is the break-even for PDH, propane dehydro, sorry, derived polypropylene versus refinery derived?
I don't have the answers for that, but definitely it must be smaller. I can perhaps do a bit of investigations here and send you the answer together with the presentation. So comparison of PDH new units which are coming online in some cases or have been building in these months. But my opinion is that being propane as main feedstock, 100% production of propane, propylene is definitely being more effective and less expensive, and therefore the break-even might be favored. But I can expand on that. Look, if I have more information. You know, difficulties for this kind of questions is that normally the producer tend not to be over open about that the kind of cost, because history, we know a cracker, how it's run, because it's been there since 50 years or so. The industry is pretty standard, but when you talk about new technologies, people tend to be more confidential. So I'm not sure I can grasp these details, but if I can, I will share with you. Good. So if there are no more questions, I thank you, those surviving until the last moment, resisting. Thank you very much to all of your attention. The questions have been very interactive questions. Pardon me if I didn't answer well to all of them. Also, my expertise is not, let's say, only comprehensive. I know more in some sectors than others, but at least I hope I was able to satisfy most of the doubts. And thank you for your curiosity, interest, and we will be sharing, as I promised, the presentation and probably also the link to the registration of the webinar. And be in touch for future occasions, because we will be repeating this event, not with the same content, with different content, maybe going deeper on netback analysis, on trade imports, or other items that we will tackle time by time. Thank you very much. Look after yourself, everybody. Health as a first, and be in touch for future occasions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Enjoy your day.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for all the information.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.